Good morning, and good morning, guys. Welcome to another fabulous episode of Exit Strategies Radio Show. Hey, I'm your host. Y'all know who I is because I done told y'all in the intro, but I'm gonna say it one more time. Corbin J. Millette, broken owner, Exit Realty Low Country Group, and I always fumble that sometimes just to see if y'all paying attention. In beautiful North Charleston, South Carolina. So, guys, look, we have a guest with us today, and I really appreciate him taking time out of his busy schedule. But he is going to be able to talk to us about some of the things that many of you guys have a tremendous amount of questions about. So I have with us today none other than Brian Modansky with EXP Realty. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
Man, I am incredible. I am incredible, man. So, look, if you don't mind, kind of give our folks, our listeners, like this high level overview, if you will, of who you are. You've been in the business, mate. You've been around, Brian, for a long time, boss.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've been around for since 2007 is when I got my license and kind of fell into the niche that kind of guided the beginning of my career. Fell into bank-owned foreclosures and REOs by accident. 450 or so of them later, I'm still going. Still a good large part of my business, though there aren't nearly what there were years ago. But
yeah.
there's still some out there, some opportunities if you're really searching for them, but nothing like what it was back, 2009, 10, 11, when the banks were really trying to get the properties off their books.
So, one of the things, so you just said, so, I've been around for a little while as well. I got in 2004 is when I started in the business. And up until about around 2007 ish, 8-ish, look here, it was just like, okay, well, look, we just gonna run, 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 run. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, wait a minute, we just hit a wall. What happened? Everything started to change, so to speak. It was a deteriorating situation, is how I'll frame it. But you got in like right there, like right around the time that the wall appeared when we went around that curve. You niched in very quickly to specialize in quote unquote what we will refer to as, distressed properties. So if you don't mind, kind of give our listeners kind of what got you there. Tell us about you too, man, in this process. And then let's kind of talk about what's on the horizon. What are you seeing? What do we
Okay.
expect as we kind of progress and talk forward? So go ahead.
So yeah, I moved to South Carolina in 2006 and decided I needed to get out of the car business. And real estate just seemed like a great idea. My mom was looking to do something new, so we actually teamed up. She's recently retired.
Good for
Real
her.
estate. Yes, yeah. Hey, I'd love to be there, but I got a couple more years to notch off. But it was kind of just something I fell into where, I was working for a company that it's where I got my license and kind of meandered around. And, I had a friend that I used to go out with, and he's like, yeah, you should come work with me. And I went with his broker, and 2 days later, I'm in the office, and my friend's not moving back here. He ended up staying up in Rock Hill. So essentially, even though I had a broker, I was essentially running 25 REO properties within 2 days. It was like, all right, well, you're jumping into the deep end, and it's been like that ever since. So it's an interesting process. Most people don't really understand what goes into a property becoming a foreclosure.
Mhm.
It does have to get to the point where someone's gotten past due, and the bank starts a lis pending, starts the actual foreclosure proceedings. And in South Carolina, they take about 9 months to a year to kind of work themselves through. They can be shorter slightly, but for the most part, they're about 9 months to a year, and sometimes they go longer. When there's pandemics and other things that kind of throw monkey wrenches into the mix. But 2006 is kind of when they started to creep back down. 2016, sorry, is when they started to creep back down. Pretty much are almost back at the same level we were at pre-pandemic in this
Mhm.
area. But foreclosure starts are up. The big difference between 2008 and 2022 is people have equity. There was a lot of things going on in 2005, 6, 7 with, unscrupulous types of loans and, no doc mortgages or no income proof mortgages. And a lot of people got in over their head. And, this time around, people have that equity. So what I'm actually seeing now is a lot of times I'm actually getting contacted by the bank right after the Liz pendant to reach out to
Mhm.
the homeowner to kind of
Mhm.
gauge where they are in the situation. Are they interested in doing a modification? Are they even aware? Like I had
Mhm.
one guy the other day that didn't realize that his property was all of a sudden moved into a flood insurance area. And because he had
Mm.
never taken out the policy and his mortgage company didn't take out the policy for him for some strange reason, he's now eligible to be foreclosed on by the bank. So, a lot of
Mm.
times it's kind of bringing people up to speed. But because people have equity, they want to give them, after all the headaches and things that Fannie Mae, HUD, VA, USDA went through with the last go around with not really pushing to modify people. They modified who they could, but they had so
Mhm.
much debt on their books and so much
Mhm.
bad paper that they had to push them through. They
Mhm.
couldn't just keep it all on there. So I think this go around, they're doing a lot more to try to keep people in either in their homes or get them options to get out of the home and maybe take some of that equity so they can set up their next situation.
That makes perfect sense. One of the conversations that I seem like I'm having very often is a reminder to people that we don't have the same thing. The market, well, I say plummeted, but a number of things happened that counteracted the momentum that the market had before we went into quote unquote recession. And I use that word very loosely because, obviously there's always economic downturns.
Right.
And some are more severe, if you will, than others. Housing experienced something very significant, in that 2007, 8, 9, going into 10 time period. The stresses, I remember, every conversation I had about 35, 40% of the market during the time period you were coming in and I'd been in for a couple of years was distressed. It was either short sale or foreclosure, and people were upside down. It was negative equity situations. And now, we're in a position that, some people, don't get me wrong, purchased quote unquote in more recent times and may have experienced some hardships. But the biggest thing is if you did experience a hardship, I'm gonna frame this as a question to you because I remember during the pandemic, during COVID at its height, so to speak, I was recording from home, and I kept saying, guys, do not listen to social media. Don't listen to people that's telling you not to pay your mortgage. Your mortgage payment is due. So, from your experience and observation, how much are you seeing it play out where people just didn't pay their mortgage payment during COVID because they believed they didn't have to pay it because somebody told them they didn't have to?
Well, that has come up. I think I like to actually call this time period like the great moderation. It's kind of it's not the great recession, it's not, it's the great moderation. I think where we're looking at now is even if you bought 2 years ago, we've had so much appreciation and especially in our local area, not that we're immune to the market slowing down, but we have a lot of things going for us. So, I've always in the last 3 years, I've actually had to really shift my business to more of a traditional business. And when I have my
Mhm.
first conversations with new clients, and I try to explain to them, especially during the pandemic, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, that May, June, July, those first couple months where it seemed like all the baby boomers decided, all right, we're gonna wait on the sidelines, see what happens here. And they're usually the biggest group to jump in that March, April, May because that's the biggest time of year where there's new listings. And at the same time that they were jumping out, it would seem like every millennial was jumping in. After they had sat on the sideline, there was the longest time it was like, oh, they're just living in their parents' basement. But they really jumped in full force at the same time. The largest section of the market decided to pull out. So, I think that's what caused almost an artificial inflation of values over the last couple of years. And, I don't foresee the market taking a deep dive, but I do see it slowing pretty dramatically. And I think it'll be worse in certain cities that maybe don't have a tech hub or they don't have something that draws people to that city to kind of maintain them through this period. We
Mhm.
have so much new home building in Charleston, though, new home builds are down dramatically, or at least new home closings are down dramatically just because interest rates have jumped up. You signed that contract a year ago and you were hoping 3.5%, 4%, and then all of a sudden a month or two ago it was 6.15, 6.22, and you're like, what? My
Exactly.
payments went from 2,100 to 2,800. Like, I can't afford it. So I think we're having a bit of a reset, but I don't think it's going to be as dramatic, at least in our market area, that maybe Austin's or the Phoenixes or the Seattles and some of these other cities that just the prices just got so outrageous. When the
Hmm.
pandemic first hit, I was telling clients that we're going to be up against multiple offers, and I don't want to ever be in a position. God forbid we're dealing with a pandemic now. We don't know where we're going to be in 2 years. The average length someone stays in a home is 7 years. That's ideally. But God forbid, maybe you have to go take care of a parent, or maybe your job has to change. I never wanted a client to be in a position where 18 months in or 13 months in, they're bringing $25,000 to a closing just to get out of their house. It's a fine line, tightrope with so many new agents that we have in our MLS. I mean, I got my license and there was only about 26 or 2,700 of us, and we have about three times that amount now. And
Yeah,
you start to
yeah,
think about
yeah.
the amount of people out there and how quickly our MLS area has expanded, that you have some agents that have great brokers, but as the agent pool grows, you need the broker pool to grow. So, not all companies, not all brokerages, not all agents, not all realtors are created equal. So I think you're going to see some people. I've seen some funny memes and things online, like all these new agents got to learn how to figure out what a price reduction is and actually marketing a
Yeah.
property. And so, there's a lot more that goes into it because, for about 18, 19 months there, you listed it, and as long as it was in the ballpark, you were going to get offers.
Mm.
And I could see why a lot of people during that time period wanted to take the idea of FISBOing, so I can save the commission. The property's going to sell them themselves, but a lot of times they probably can sell the property. They may not get the most money for it, but they can sell the property. So I think you'll start to see some changes, some tightening, and you may even see some agents come out of the market over the next 2 years, because I think you're just going to see the people who actually put the money into their advertising, the people who've had a base, the people who have their referrals. I think you're going to see them be able to build, whereas someone who's a new agent who's kind of just had, 5, 6, 7, 12 deals not thrown at them. They've done the work, but they never experienced the other side of the market. So they don't have the expertise to excel. I think you're going to see some of those people maybe get weeded out over the next couple of years.
That's a very fair assessment, Brian, because we watched it before. As the market shifts, the people that are most serious will maintain, they'll stay in the business, other people won't. And it's interesting. So I became a full-time realtor in 2006 and have been since. I got in, I was in, but I was able to kind of get a stable hold on what my business was going to be, and determine my business within the first year and a half in the industry, and then converted to a quote unquote full time. Even though I tell people I was still full time, I just worked two jobs full time, so
Right.
to speak. But in that change and in that instance, what I learned was, look, you got to go to work. And things that we went through during that time period of having the hard conversations of, hey, look, this needs to be done, this adjustment, knocking quote unquote down these doors, doing these things to generate activity to get property sold, different animal. And then also at that time we were competing because Lord, we had a abundance of inventory. I remember one time you can click in the MLS and you had 15,000 plus, units on the market. Now we're under, I think we're still under 3,000 thereabouts
Yeah.
in this area. And this is a conversation that's beyond just, the Charleston regional or Charleston metro. Other parts of the country are experiencing the same thing. But, tell me kind of what you are foreseeing. Like, obviously this is a different experience than what we had last time. But at the same time, I've ran across some people here lately that haven't paid mortgages or mortgage payments in significant period of time, and they kind of have been under the radar, but now they're being, okay, hey, what's going on? Hey, do you want to sell this property? Hey, what do you need to do so we can either get you back on track, or you need to solve or remedy this issue? Is that kind of what you're seeing as well?
Well, so we're now at the point. Well, so the forbearance, the moratorium on foreclosures ended in September of last year. So, if we go back to when I was talking about the timeline of what it takes a list pending to be filed to actually becoming a foreclosure that's on the master and equity list, it's usually about 9 to 12 months. But with the pandemic, all these different municipalities, they basically closed a lot of their departments down, and it took a long time between the attorneys, the judges, the different clerks, and the different people that work in the different offices in the master and equity, and to really get ramped up. So, let's just say that's probably 3, 4 months of time there where everything was kind of getting sorted out. We're now at a time where we're about 7, 8 months past that. And that's kind of to the point where like Liz pendants are going to get filed. And so I think we're going to start to see the numbers jump in South Carolina. It's still not going to be dramatic. When you go from zero and they tell you the foreclosures are up 300%, it's really easy to be up 300% when you're only doing a couple of months. I'm actually seeing a lot of the ones I've been surprised by. There's been quite a few reverse mortgage foreclosures, home equity
Mhm,
conversion mortgage foreclosures,
mhm,
and those typically go regardless because I don't know if your viewers are familiar with the product, but it's typically a product someone over the age of 62 gets, and
mhm,
it's a way to use the equity of your home to be able to still have a life. And a
mhm,
lot of times people don't have a plan when they pass away what happens with the property. Sometimes too much equity is taken out and it's just not worth the family to take on.
mhm,
Sometimes the family doesn't even know that the person took out a home equity conversion mortgage until the person's gone. So those typically have kind of made their way through the system regular time. I'm
mhm,
also seeing a lot of HOAs. If you actually
mhm,
look at the master and equity for the three counties, there was about 7 or 8 HOAs this last for September. So I'm seeing a lot of
mhm,
HOAs pulling the trigger quickly on it. So I mean, it's hard for me to project exact numbers, but they will be more than what they were a year ago. But they're still, I see it being more like 2017, 18 when it comes to numbers. Like right
mhm,
now, I think there's only active on the market. I think there's only 7 REO properties active
mhm,
and about another 7 or 8 pending. Back in 2011, there was 110 active, 120 active, with another 110, 120 that were available that weren't under
mhm,
contract. So that were under contract, just waiting to close. So I mean, we're in a completely different, for the numbers, we'd need something else to cause the market to go that direction. But will there be opportunities out there? I think so. I think also, the last couple of years you had investors really hop in and a lot of DIY, we're going to get our first income property, and people could make mistakes where
mhm,
now, because the market's tightening up, because appreciation's not going up the same way, because interest rates have gone up so much, people's buying power is down. So people aren't going to pay that extra 20,000 or 30,000 that would have been the padding for you to make a good deal as an investor. So I think you're
mhm,
going to start to see some properties from the investor side come through over the next couple of years. The
mhm.
next, probably 18 months to 2 years. People, they went in with the best of intentions, but can't always hit a home run on your first time out there. So,
That is
I
very
kind of think I think that's kind of some of the things you may start to see in the market.
That's interesting. So you're right about that. So, we've had a flood of activity. And I say this thing, Brian, to consumers, I say it to, our agents here all the time. Consumer generally lags behind. The headlines that hit the media, like you just said, foreclosed up 300%. Well, that is relative because you're looking at the percentage change, but not the actual number change to understand what that really means. And the consumer usually lags behind on the information. They don't understand and know what's going on in the market. I still get people that call and say, I want to buy a foreclosure. REO properties are not prevalent. You're lucky every now and again one shows up. And we've been that way for so long, but yet consumers still believe, feel, and especially when they see headlines such as what you shared there, that there's still an abundance of foreclosure opportunity. Our market is different. Appreciation took hold, and most people, the beignets, the one that's been in their home for some time, tend to have an equity position in their homes, and it's less likely that they're going to be in a negative equity situation, which means that there's going to be a number of avenues available to them to avoid foreclosure. That's still going to be at least somewhat beneficial to them. And that's one of the things that the consumers miss.
Yeah,
Is that fair to say?
no, it's very fair to say, because I mean, even if you bought $200,000 house 2 years ago, it's closer to worth three now than it was. So you can get out. I mean, worst case scenario, I mean, I would rather walk out with 35, 40 grand after attorney's fees or 50, whatever it is at that point. Because typically, if you didn't pay your mortgage, you probably didn't pay your HOA, you probably didn't, there's probably other things that are going to eat into that equity. But people didn't have that option beforehand. They were 70,000, 100,000, $200,000 upside down, and they
Mm,
just didn't know where to go. They figured at that point, we'll just stay in the property as long as we can. Banks, it was kind of a crapshoot. It's funny. It was sometimes I would get a property in like 2015, 2016, 2017, but it came out of the foreclosure started in 2010 or 2009. And you're like, how did this go so long? And then you'd have other ones that started like 7 months earlier and it made it through the system. But a lot of times it has to do with portfolios they're willing to write off and what portfolios are not. Did the portfolio get sold off to an investor, third party? So a lot of times there's different external factors. But the market we have now, I get calls all the time. I want to buy a foreclosure. I'm like, that's great. There's about 7 or 8 on the market, and they're in Reevesville, Pineville. They're out in Monk's Corner or Bono or and I only mention those in Santee. I only mention those because I was in Santee, Reevesville, and Pineville today at 3 of my foreclosure listings. So yeah, it was a nice little 4-hour drive.
And people also miss the work, like you said, that goes into an REO property. And REO, for our listeners, guys, is real estate owned, so a foreclosure. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into keeping that property prior to it being sold, correct?
Correct. So there's a lot of it varies from bank to bank, institution to institution, government entity to government entity. So sometimes the agent that has the listing or assigned the listing, they can be required to do a rekey, keep the utilities on at the property. They may want to do a rehab. Like Fannie Mae right now is rehabbing probably about 70-80% of their inventory.
Hmm.
Now sometimes you can be on the hook for a portion of that. Like they want you to outlay it. So you may have $10,000 tied up in a property for 60 to 90 days while you're waiting for things to fall in line so that you can get reimbursement. So it's
Hmm.
not, I have a lot of people contact me. I want to become an REO agent. I'm like, all right, well, let's go down and let's go through what's going to cost to be one. I mean, so there's different portals and websites you have to sign up for. Some of them are free, most of them are not. Like this one called ResNet. That's $700 a year. Equator's $400 a year. Pyramid Platforms $800 a year. Zome's $2,200 a year. You start adding up this just to be an REO, you have a $7,000 or $8,000, and that's just to get onto the portals. There's
Hmm.
no guarantee that you have a relationship built with an asset manager at one of the companies on those portals. So then there's
Exactly.
also the other side of building relationships with the asset managers who are essentially your client, because you're not meeting someone out, and it's not like I'm calling FISBO lists or expireds and
Hmm.
trying to pick up a client that way. I'm calling banks and, hey, who's the rep for South Carolina? I'd like to see. It's trying to build relationships, and just like in the mortgage industry and the real estate industry, the guy who's at this company today, he's here for 2 years and now he's at that company. And
Yeah.
you spent all this time building relationship, and now you're just trying to find out the name of the person who replaced him. Um,
Yeah.
so there's conferences, and so there's a big conference coming up in Dallas in about two and a
Five,
half weeks.
5 star,
Five
right?
star,
Yep.
exactly.
Hmm.
So,
Exactly.
there'll be a lot of banks and asset managers and a lot of realtors I know that'll be there. And it's 3 days, and that's a nice little pocket change out of definitely a deal out of my pocket to go down there. But
Hmm.
it gives me the opportunity to have face to faces and some of the things you need to do when you're an REO agent. But everybody says that they want to get into REO. This is probably, unless you already have a footing or someone where you already have it in somewhere, it's definitely not something that you can jump into with both feet and expect to do really well right off the bat.
That's fair. And most people, again, going to that one point there, Brian. And thank you so much for sharing that. That people don't understand. That's across the board in this business. People jumping into the real estate industry thinking they can make a lot of money, but don't have to spend any. They don't have to invest. They don't have to invest their time. They don't have to attend the conferences, trainings, sign up for all these platforms. I'm a member, and I know you're a member of like a bunch of MLSs. So every quarter you getting this massive bill because of all MLSs that you got to be a part of, and
Right.
association memberships and all this other stuff that costs so much to be in this industry. So, Brian, look, we quickly come to quote unquote the end of our show. If you don't mind, for our listeners, please share your contact information.
I can be reached at team@modanskyhomes.com, and that's MODANSKYHOMES.com. And my direct line's 843-628-8910.
So, Brian, again, thank you so much, my man, for being a part of the Exit Strategy Radio Show family, for being with us today. And most importantly, look here, you dropped some jewels and some nuggets. For our listeners, guys, thank y'all so much for tuning in. As you know, we always say this thing to you guys. We love you. We love you. We love you. And we're going to see you guys out there in those streets.